I appreciate your being here this morning, so let me add my welcome. Of those nice things that Jay just said, the only thing you really need to know is that I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for a long time. I teach administration. One of my former students is here, who's one of your superintendents, Chuck Maranzano, Dr. Maranzano. I hope I didn't do too much harm to you when you were at William and Mary. It's good to see you again, Chuck. I'm glad to have you in our audience today. I'm also very pleased to introduce Dr. Matt Jennings, who is the superintendent for the Alexandria Township School District. Matt is piloting the teacher portion of our evaluation system this year, and a little later in the morning, Matt and one of his colleagues, Joy Dominic, will be talking about their experiences. I thought, rather than my just telling you what you might do, which is more or less a sales pitch today. I'm selling shoes today, so let me just be honest. I think it would be helpful for you to hear from one of your own colleagues about how does this work? What can you anticipate if you buy into my evaluation system? So for the order of the day, I'll begin with a framework. I'm going to use a couple of PowerPoints, if you'll forgive me for going into that, just to tell a story of how this works. We'll get into the technical aspects. I'd like to have ample time for us to talk. About 10 o'clock, I'm going to invite Dr. Jennings and his colleague to add some comments and share with you and answer questions. We'll take a quick break. Then we're going to come back in for a short demonstration from the electronic platform that will accompany my evaluation system. It's My Learning Plan Oasis. Do any of you use My Learning Plan currently? And we'll also have pricing. We'll talk about the things that I hope, the issues that are on your mind. So why don't we get started with that? This is much less a normal kind of presentation where I'm not telling stories and presenting content and trying to bring research to practice. Today it's talking about what you might do. It is preparing for your rollout next year on teacher evaluation. But let me also say, in this sort of creating this anticipatory set, I'd like to bring into the conversation leader evaluation as well. Next summer, August, you're going to be implementing teacher evaluation. The following year will be principal evaluation. We're going to offer a package that includes both. So, and we're going to do that right up front, so you'll have some options on how you proceed with it. At any point, if you have questions, comments, issues, please call let me know. I'll pause periodically and invite your thoughts. But if you have an issue you want to talk about, let me know, and we'll go down that road as far as we can. You don't have to agree with me. I think you're entitled to be wrong. Seriously, though, I do want to entertain the thoughts that are on your mind. First, sort of story that I'd like to tell, PowerPoint, a presentation, is background, and I'm going to do it fairly quickly. I want to walk through why we're having this conversation. Why are you even here today? Well, for one, your state, in its wisdom, has decided you'll have a new evaluation system. That's a motivator. It's an external impetus. There are better reasons, though, to be doing this. Ultimately, today we will be talking. Good. Hi, Jenny. I have a team of people who work with me, and this is the only day I can be in New Jersey for the next month or two, and where there were a lot of presentations, and so one of my colleagues wanted to watch today. Yes, we will talk about the technical attributes of how you evaluate. We're going to deal with the tools and the techniques. That's not the story, ladies and gentlemen. That's only the edge of it. It's only the tip of the iceberg. This is really about teaching and learning. At the end of the day, if what we do in New Jersey or any of the states or any of the places where we're engaging in this kind of reform effort, if it doesn't touch the life of a child, it's been wasted effort. What we do has to make children better. There are only two reasons why you and I have a job as administrators. One is teaching and learning, and two is supporting teaching and learning. And it's that simple. This evaluation system should be about getting better teachers, supporting better teachers. We're not about getting people, we're about helping people. Now the fact is, and I will not shy away from it, if this were an audience of all teachers, I would still say the same. There are some teachers who got on the wrong bus. Some people, they're not teachers perhaps, but they got on the wrong bus. There must be accountability in the system, but we're not talking wholesale dismissal. I don't know where you're going to replace those people anyway. But we are talking about a balance of accountability and professional growth that is sensible and that makes evaluation a fundamentally important tool for reform. One of the things that we have learned in the U.S. and across other nations in recent years is that reform begins and ends in the classroom. Everything you do, Common Core curriculum, is going to flow through the classroom. You can articulate your curriculum all day and put it in the hands of the wrong person, and it won't work. Teachers matter most. Now, there's a lot of research behind that. That's not the topic. That's not what I'm going to talk about for the day. But I just want to put this in context. Yes, we'll deal with the tools and the techniques, but the big picture is about kids. If a child walks through your building or my building 180 times during a year, that child should be better for having been there. That's what we want out of this system. That's what we want out of everything that we're doing. Now, with that, let me turn our attention to a little bit of the background of evaluation. What's wrong with what we already have? Apparently something's wrong with it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be changing, I assume. At least I hope that would be true. And I can tell you a lot is wrong. Before I go there, I started to make another point about a key lesson we've learned in the U.S. and in other countries is that, no, you can't have reform unless you have good teachers. And number two, and this is what's so pertinent for our discussion today, you can't know if you have good teachers unless you have good evaluation. Historically, we have dramatically violated the premises of being a profession in the way we evaluate teachers and administrators. Everybody gets the same rating. I don't care what system you have in place, everybody gets the same rating. Study after study has indicated that 95 to 98% of teachers get the very same rating. If they're good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter to us, we give them all the same rating. There's very clear evidence that unless and until we're able and willing to monitor our own ranks and to distinguish effective from less effective teaching, your school will not improve. I don't care what reform effort you put in, you must know if you have good teachers and good leaders in your building. So that's sort of big picture thinking. Now let me return to so I'm going to begin with a what's wrong, why are we doing this question. And I'll give you about 4 or 5 answers of what's wrong with the way we're doing our business, and then I'd like to turn to how to fix it. What if we build a teacher evaluation system from the ground up? How would we do that? Some of the what's wrong, I would begin with a point of how disjointed we are in the way we handle HR functions. We have one department that's responsible essentially for recruiting and the selection process. We have another department or another person that deals with evaluation, that's the principal, and we have another department altogether that does development. Sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. If we don't get those arrows aligned, this is not going to be a worthy and workable system in your district. One of the lessons from countries like Finland and South Korea and high-performing countries, I just finished a study for another state legislature on comparing the educational system. It's actually, I do work in lots of states, but this one happened to be in Virginia for the legislature, on how do we compare with those high-achieving countries in the world. This is one of the places where we don't compare very well. They have a seamless approach from the beginning to end, hiring the best, keeping the best, developing the best, and you get the best results when you do that. We have to get these pieces aligned. Evaluation has to come out of the closet and become a fundamental player in improving performance in your school. We have to hire and use what we hire for should be what we fire for. Now, I only say it that way because it rhymes, but my point is the criteria on the research of what makes a good teacher should be the criteria that we use for hiring, for developing, for evaluating, and flowing it all the way back consistently for growing and improving our teachers. We need to fix this problem. Here's another problem that we have in the way we've evaluated, and I bet you, that's an easy bet. I know this to be the case. This is the way we have evaluated teachers. You get what I'm talking about? I had a principal who, when I was a middle school teacher, who loved clean, neat, orderly classroom, and I buy that. I see the importance of that. I had a classroom that faced the highway, and he always wanted my blinds to be level. And it didn't matter what else I did, it seemed to me. I always knew when he was coming, too, by the way. So I got my desk in a row, got the trash cleaned up, but especially I made sure the blinds were level. If I did that, I got good ratings. It's so ingrained in me when I visit my wife's classroom, I go over and level her blinds for her. I don't know what things like this have to do with kids learning. We've got to focus on what makes a difference, and this isn't it, ladies and gentlemen. Here's another problem that we have, and I alluded to this a moment ago. We have enormous grade inflation. Here's just one study to illustrate this from the Chicago Public Schools. Over a period of about 4 or 5 years, it was a bad thing. In fact, historically, it's been a bad thing to be called meeting expectation in Illinois or in Chicago. Now, these are not drawn to scale. The Jupiter and the Saturn that you see should be larger than what they're appearing to be. Everybody, almost everybody, was superior or excellent. I mean, something's wrong if you could only be meeting expectation. And look at Pluto out here on unsatisfactory. We don't even know if it's a planet anymore. There's so few. I developed the evaluation system from the Miami-Dade schools, which is the 4th largest district in America. They have about 23,000 teachers or so. And the year before we started, principals had a negotiated agreement where they would observe teachers for 20 minutes at a time and evaluate 44 criteria. Now that's ludicrous to begin. Less than 30 seconds per criteria. You're wasting time if that's what you're doing. But out of those 44 criteria with more than 20,000 teachers, I think there were 7 teachers who received an unsatisfactory rating on anything. Now, I'm not talking about getting teachers, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, when we have this kind of grade inflation, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're saying everybody's good when they're not. I can guarantee, well, I can't guarantee you, I will tell you the propensity is that when you have novice teachers, they're not as good. They need to grow and improve. It's very clear from the research that a lot of people have conducted on this issue. And you have people in your ranks who are not very good, but we give them the same ratings. We have to fix this problem. So, here's another problem that we have. So let's assume we've evaluated. What do we do with the results once we've evaluated? Study of one of my former students who's a professor at the University of Virginia now, in her dissertation, found that in Virginia, principals identified 5% of their teachers as being incompetent. Of those 5%, 0.5% had a personnel action taken. Ever. Guess what the number one personnel action is? It's transfer. You cannot improve your school until you fix problems like this. That's what's wrong with evaluation. And we can do something about it. But again, let me remind you, I'm not talking about hitting people, I'm talking about helping people. You get the picture of what I'm intending? Okay. Now, what would we do to fix it? I'm going to paint in very broad strokes and fairly quickly what we need to do to fix evaluation in your district, in any district. Number one, let me back up a moment. We need to determine what is the basis of the evaluation system. I'm talking teachers specifically for now. We as well could be talking leader evaluation, superintendent evaluation. We could talk about a variety. The answer to that first question, what will be the basis? It's job-relevant performance standards. Now, in the past, I worked on an evaluation system that had about 20 performance standards for teachers. I wrote about it. Chuck has worked with this system with some of the districts previously. It's good on paper. I don't believe it works in practice anymore. The first assignment I had as the consultant for the Georgia Department of Education in developing their new teacher and leader evaluation system was to reduce the number of standards they have. The only difference between Georgia and you is that they have $400 million and race to the top money to implement. But otherwise, they're pretty much in the same boat that you are. But the first thing that I did was to work with Georgia on their teacher standards. They had 28 standards for teachers. They had invested heavily in this over a period of years. And the feedback that they got was that it's not feasible. You can't collect enough evidence across that many standards. We revised the system and developed a new one in Georgia that has 10. The system that I'm going to bring to you has 7 standards. So I am not going to advocate a 20 standard or 70 standard system for teachers or administrators. We're going to have a diagnostic profile, but it is going to balance feasibility with desirability, and it will be technically sound. Instead of this, we're going to go with a system that looks more like this one. Standards on professional knowledge, planning, instructional delivery. We could add one more if we wanted to, which could be differentiation, but it's captured under instructional delivery. Communication may or may not be a separate standard. Many times that proves to be better integrated across multiple standards. Some states want it to be a separate standard, some don't. Climate, learning environment, management is what I'm talking about. Assessment. Of all the factors that new teachers have when they come to you, which of those do you think teachers are least prepared for the classroom? I'm talking about the research on what makes a good teacher good and factoring that now into an evaluation system. Of assessment, classroom management, instruction planning, which of those 4 do you think new teachers are least equipped to be effective in? Classroom management? Sort of setting you up. That's what we all think. It's not true. It's assessment. Our new teachers, and I guarantee you if our new teachers can't do it, our experienced teachers haven't had an adequate dose of how to use data properly, how to assess formatively and drive instruction. That needs to be a prominent standard. Professional behavior, the caring, the ethics of our profession, what we do, how you measure that. Some of those things are hard to teach, but they're extraordinarily important in the work we do. And then finally, student results. That's the game changer. In New Jersey, you will have 50%, I think it is, from the state's recommendation of the evaluation based on student progress. I don't know if 50% is the right amount. I don't know if it's magical. We may revisit this in 3 or 4 years. But I do know it's proper to include measures of student progress. It's just getting the right balance between the process of teaching and the results of teaching. The evaluation system that I'll bring you will have both. And it looks like these. That's just another picture of it. Second question that we have to engage in is how do you document the performance? It's one thing to tell me what I'm supposed to do. It's another thing to know if I'm doing my job. And the system that I will share with you today has multiple data sources. We will use observation, various forms of observation. If the walkthrough visits are long enough, we could include those. You can't do much with a 30-second walkthrough. They're not designed for teacher evaluation. But if we expand that time just a bit, we can do that. We can put these on a Palm Pilot or a handheld device, your iPad, or whatever it is that you're wanting to use. I'm not an advocate of portfolios, but I am an advocate of data of teachers presenting selected documents on their own behalf. So the teacher has a voice in the evaluation. Show me your planning evidence. Show me how you use assessment. Show me the aggregation and disaggregation, the data analysis of where your students are and how they're learning. You can include student surveys if you choose. There are going to be options in my evaluation model. You can choose to include client surveys if you want them. We have field-tested student surveys for 4 groups: primary, intermediate, middle school, and high school. You can use them in various ways. That will be provided. And then finally, an area that is not an option is student progress. In student progress, I'm not going to deal a lot with this today, but we have to think of 2 groups. One, you have a tested group. Wrong state. New Jersey has chosen to use a growth model that's called student growth percentiles. More than 20 states are using this approach. That only covers about 30% of your teachers. You will have data only. You could calculate those only for 4th through 8th grade for reading and math teachers in New Jersey. All other teachers are outside of that box. What do we do with them? We're going to provide a process that I've used extensively with other states called student growth, student learning objectives, SLOs, or student achievement goals. We can call them, they're called different things in different states. We will look at how we will do that. Not today. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But what I'm saying is that here we have to approach this from a problem solution standpoint. And that's one of the problems that every state has, and I've been working on it extensively with some colleagues on how we're going to handle that, how we're going to roll it out. Question 2 then is, how do you document my performance? It's using multiple data sources. Good morning, Joy.
Good morning.
Here's a sample. This is the high school version of the student survey, or maybe not. But it's I'm kidding, it's not high school, it's primary. My teacher listens to me. There's evidence to show that kids can distinguish between whether they like the teacher and whether they believe the teacher's doing good work all the way down to first grade. So there's going to be some local choice for you to decide what you want. Here's an example of a middle school survey. Using artifacts serve as an excellent complement to observation. One of the things in one study, our research team learned that when you ask teachers for documents or artifacts, they give you areas, documentation in areas like professionalism, but not very much on classroom management. Well, we don't need it in classroom management. We can get that through an observation, but we can't get the professionalism and the assessment and some of the other things by sitting in your classroom. We need some other evidence. That's a goal. I'm not going to go there. Question 3, how should performance be rated? At the end of the day, you're going to need to provide a rating. And you have a number of choices. The system that I will bring you will be a 4-point scale using a behaviorally anchored rating scale, or sometimes called a performance appraisal rubric. The 2 green areas are go. The yellow is cautionary, and the red means you can't work here for very long if you stay in red. When we use rubrics such as this, we build significantly higher inter-rater reliability, trustworthiness in the system. When I've used them, we aim for about 75 or 80% inter-rater agreement among evaluators using a rubric applying multiple data sources to the standards. And we will provide training on how to do this and with the partnership with NJPSA. Okay, that's enough there. Let me pause for a moment. Comments or questions? Then I'd like to move to an overview of the Strong evaluation model.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
Learning objectives, when you get down to that level, is that from the teacher perspective, or is there a self-responsibility,
There has to be a monitoring process in student learning objectives. They go all the way to the classroom, but you can create school-level or district-level objectives. Some states prefer to have these approved that are all aligned. There has to be a monitoring process where we create what's called SMART goals. There's another method that we use to determine the rigor of the goal, and so it works with the principal and the teacher or team of teachers to establish the goal. There are 2 big parts to start. Number 1, you have to have baseline data for your students. That's going to be a big hole for most of you. There are some methods and tools that we've been working on, however, to identify and work with, and we have lots and lots of examples of how to do it. And there would be training specifically on that.
So it sounds like it's teacher learning, teacher-driven or district or school-driven.
It's more district-driven, but not only teacher-driven. You don't turn it all over to the teachers.
Okay, so what I was asking is, does it get down to a level where teachers can create some in the classroom for students to become involved in their own
Yes,
learning?
yes.
Okay.
If you have district school goals in the classroom, the teacher doesn't need to own those goals. The kids do. And you can translate those into the level where you come in and you ask the student, what are you doing today? And that student can say, this is the objective I'm working on, this is what I'm trying to achieve. That is the best way to use a standards-based approach. So absolutely you can do that. Okay, let me give you a quick walkthrough of the major components and processes that we'll be using with my evaluation design. I want to remind you that our focus is effectiveness. That's the goal. Evaluation is merely the means. Now, let's look at some of the details. If you choose, and you're going to have a choice of at least 4 evaluation systems. And I'm not going to sell my evaluation system at the expense of others. I think there are good quality elements in the other choices that you have. I think Marzano's, Danielson's, McCrell's have good elements and good processes. And The key is getting a quality evaluation system in place, whether it's mine or someone else's. Of course I hope you choose mine. But I think it's necessary that you address those issues I presented in the beginning. That's the critical issue. Is this good for kids? If you do choose to use my evaluation system, here are some of the prominent characteristics that you will find. One is that I will deliver a uniform performance evaluation system for teachers, principals, and educational specialists. By specialists, I mean the professional, non-teaching employees in your building, about 25% of the people who walk through the schoolhouse door every day. Counselors, librarians, OT, PT, speech pathology. You can't use a teacher evaluation system with those individuals. We will deliver camera-ready handbooks for a group that we call specialists, for teachers, and if you choose to include the principals, either now or later, we will do the same for that. The terminology will be consistent. A standard will mean the same thing across all the systems. A performance appraisal rubric will mean the same. The rating scales will be comparable. The data sources will be individualized based on the position. The standards will be distinctive based on the position, 3 groups of standards. But we want a uniform system. You can't have 10 or 12 evaluation systems running around in your school. You need this to be uniform. I've already mentioned we'll provide camera-ready handbooks and training material if you choose to train your own teachers. We will provide training options through NJPSA for teachers. There will be a required training component for evaluators. But beyond the evaluators, we will provide the materials for you if you want to train your own teachers in your building. If you want us to do it, we'll do it for you, but you can do it yourself. In addition to the handbooks, then, we're going to give you fact sheets, training materials, PowerPoints, awareness, orientation materials, background research, whatever it is that you need that we have, and we have a lot of documents that would support you, that would come to you in this packet. Thirdly, I've already talked about the simplified set of research-based standards. I'm not going to give you a set of 20 or 40 or 80 standards per employee. You're going to get less than 10 standards per person. It still will be a diagnostic profile. It's still a medical model, diagnosis, prognosis, but it's intended to capture feasibility. And I've done that purposefully. What I will share with you has been extensively field tested and published and presented in a lot of venues. It's being used currently, versions of this, across a number of states, across other countries. And some of the other vendors will be able to make that same claim. All I'm telling you is that we aren't experimenting on you, New Jersey. You're not a guinea pig. I'm going to bring something to you that I know has a very good pedigree and will work for you. Teacher system is very carefully aligned with NTASC. The principal system is very carefully aligned with ISLIC, for whatever that's worth. ISLIC wasn't designed for principal evaluation, by the way, but we aligned it anyway. The system, I've already mentioned this, we want a balance between professional growth and accountability. And I'm not going to shy away from the accountability part of it. It will have both elements included. We'll use multiple data sources. There will be measures of student progress and the ways and means and tools to do that, such as the student learning objectives. I have a book that we can make available. We will have training materials for you. We will take you through and train you on how to do student learning objectives. And we'll have options for follow-up training. And at the end of the day, you will be able to generate a diagnostic profile for your employee, your teacher, your principal, or whatever the position happens to be. And you can also calculate a final summative rating if you choose to do that. And it will meet your state requirements, but it still can be tweaked and customized at the local level if there are some needs to do that. Here's an example of a standard. It's instructional planning. I'm not going to read that, but it's what I'm calling a performance standard. Still pretty broad language. Every single teacher would be evaluated on this. It's a loose, tight system. It is tight in the sense that every standard will apply to every teacher. It's loose in that there will be a selection of indicators that will not serve as a glorified checklist. These are simply research-based indicators of what a person would be doing if that person is doing the job well. These are look-fors. These are the behaviors. And it's not that we need to get 4 out of 5. It may be in advanced chemistry, certain indicators are more prone to be prominent, whereas in kindergarten, other indicators may be. That's the loose part. All of which of the indicators are research-based, but we're not creating an 80 or 70 or 60 set of items on a checklist. We're wanting to evaluate based on the standard, which is planning in this instance. There will be a rubric to go with each standard that has been specifically designed, and there are 2 versions of the rubric. The one that I have in front of you is called a stepwise progression. It's both qualitative and quantitative. Some states that I work with prefer this approach. Others prefer what's called behavioral anchors. So rather than the progression from one level to the next, there are specific anchors that we can place in and track them across. There are pros and cons for both. There's no perfect rubric. In fact, they're all bad in some way. Just so happens that they're necessary. Some are less bad than others. We need to use them. And they will give you more trustworthiness in your system. It will give us much greater reliability when we implement a system, and you can then take the results to the bank. Here are the standards that I will recommend for teachers. Knowledge of the profession, planning, delivery, assessment of and for learning, learning environment, which includes classroom management, robustness of the learning, and so forth, professionalism, and student progress. Matt will be able to tell you a couple of ways that or how he's handling the student progress part. There are a couple of ways we can address that. Principal standards will be different. The same format follows. The same common uniform evaluation system works, but the standards are the research-based evidence of what makes a principal good, or an assistant principal. Instructional leadership and how that gets operationally defined. We can't use just broad nebulous terms. Underneath each of these, there will be specific look-fors that can be used to document the person's performance. So instructional leadership, school climate. Here's a surprise for a lot of people. Human resource administration or leadership in the building. Most of the human resource work happens in the school, not at the district level. Who does the interviewing and and looking at the demonstration lesson and the recommending for hiring? Who provides that embedded staff development? Who evaluates those people? It happens at the school level, and there's a fundamentally important role for principals to play in that. Don't negate the power and the importance of organizational management. The literature has consistently talked about the glory of instructional leadership at the expense of organizational management. There's very strong, solid evidence showing us now that you can't be a good principal unless you're a good organizational manager. And in fact, you get higher gain scores when you pay attention to organizational management issues than spending time sitting in a classroom. Now, I'm not saying don't observe, but I'm telling you the whole package of the things principals do is what makes them good. You can't have a principal who's not an effective communicator and consistently aware of the community relations impact that is occurring for everything that I say and do. I live in a glass house if I'm a principal. Professionalism. What are the professional behaviors? How I communicate with others, or how I collaborate, the ethics of the profession, the atmosphere that I help create in that building, and on and on and on. And then, again, student progress. We're making this as consistent with the teacher design as is appropriate. And the same thing happens with the specialist positions. Rather than instruction, we have program or instructional services. Some of those people, like school psychologists, don't teach. They do other things. Librarians in high schools don't teach. Elementary librarians do. So we want to account for all of that. But this turns out to be pretty consistent, but unique enough to fit those specialist positions. Underneath them are indicators that relate to those jobs. And notice there's a difference. Instead of number 7, instead of student progress, sometimes it's program progress. A social worker doesn't work with kids directly in the sense of getting higher student achievement, but they do increase attendance rates, or they do other things. Those would be the kind of measures that we would be using. Data sources are similar to the ones that I talked about earlier, a documentation log, selected observations, student learning objectives, student surveys, if you choose to have the student surveys, which would be an option in your district. For principals, we would do goal setting and student progress, informal observations or site visits, documentation log, client surveys, which would be teachers or staff members for the principal, if you choose to have that. We'll provide all the forms that you need for each of those positions. There will be optional forms. If you want a self-assessment included, we will make it available in the packet that we provide for you. If you want a communication log, PD log, whatever it is that you're doing, the way more seamless and efficient we can make this, we will provide those options that you can choose without violating the total design for the evaluation, but we will give you local choice in how we do this. I want this to be as straightforward and easy to use as it can be while getting good results. I want you to think about two words. We want efficiency and effectiveness. Effectiveness is more important. We don't want to harm that at the expense of efficiency, but we do want it to be efficient and workable and customizable where appropriate. My partner with the electronic management system will be My Learning Plan, or OASIS, and you'll see that later. We'll work with you on how to use the forms that are included. Here's a sample observation form. Here's a documentation form. Surveys you've seen. Terms you're already familiar with that I've shared with you earlier across the areas. All I'm depicting here is that we don't want a normal bell-shaped curve in how we evaluate teachers. In fact, this isn't drawn to scale. We don't want an equal number of unsatisfactories or unacceptables as we do exemplaries. But we don't want 95% to be exemplary. That's all I'm saying with this. Here is a picture of one of the parts of a summative evaluation rating and how we would provide that. Student progress, we can get into whether it's 40 or 50% of the rating. I've done this a lot with states, and we'll work through, actually, let me draw right here. Within that student progress, we're going to need part of it coming from a growth measure like SGP and part of it coming from multiple alternative methods like the student learning objectives that you would get at the local level. Principals, we still want to have multiple ways of seeing they're doing good work. Student learning objectives where it's appropriate, goal setting where it's appropriate, student growth percentiles where it's appropriate, which means your elementary and middle schools. High schools in New Jersey may not have student growth percentiles, so we're going to have to look at some alternatives for the high schools, which is true in all the states, or most of the states. So what do you need to implement my evaluation system? Requirements will be that evaluators receive a minimum of 3 days of training. We will provide a 3-day package, 2 days initially with 1 day of follow-up, and it will be provided at NJPSA's site right here, or we can provide it at your site. And there's a place where it becomes more cost efficient for you if you do it at your site, and I'll give you the pricing in just a bit. We will provide, what I'm saying essentially at this point is that we're going to be here to support you after you get your evaluation materials. We're going to be here with ongoing professional development, options and support, and being in your buildings or available to be in your buildings or available for having programs where you can come to us and we will work with you for the duration. This is not a one-shot, one-year project. You're going to be developing and focusing on better student assessment, instructional leadership skills. Place where I keep seeing our principals struggling is how to diagnose properly. So if you visit a classroom, what do you see? And what do you say about what you saw? And then another area where I say our principal's really struggling is prognosis. So you saw me doing something. What do you do to help me get better? You can't say, go see that teacher next door. That won't work. It might in a few instances, but overall it won't. What do you do? What pill do you give me to help me get better? There's going to be an ongoing professional development need around these issues. I'm not here selling an evaluation tool. I hope we're selling a solution to what our fundamental business is, which is teaching and learning. Format is that we'll provide the training on site or we'll provide it here. We will have train the trainers as an option. New Jersey is diverse. You have 660 or so school districts. You're not Hawaii, which has one. You have 660, and we'll have different solutions for different people. We will also be able to provide options for certification if you want that. I had dinner last evening with ETS, talking about certification. My learning plan is another issue with I've talked in some of the states. We're building certification, so you can say that this person is now certified as a trainer. We won't guarantee that that person will make no mistakes. We will guarantee that they have achieved that level of certification that you can now say this individual is a formal evaluator for us. Cost, I'll have a handout. I'm going to wait until after our next presentation to talk about it. Bottom line, I want to take you back to where I started a moment ago. If you want outstanding results, here's how you get them. There's no other formula that I know. Our business is pretty simple. Effective teachers and leaders equals student achievement. There's nothing else in our business that works. Okay, that's as fast as Southerners talk. Let me turn to Dr. Matt Jennings, the superintendent of the Alexandria Township School District, Joy Dominic, who has worked extensively with and been trained on this evaluation model, and I'd like for them to share their thoughts from a practical standpoint. What would you say to us? So, Matt, this is yours. Enjoy.
Trust was a major issue because they wanted to know what was the ulterior motive. Why are you really doing this was kind of the question behind the question. And what we found was that there was a great deal of belief that this had something to do with either getting rid of a specific tenured teacher, or it was somebody had the thought that it was going to be tied to merit pay. We were brilliant in the fact that we entered into this in the same year as collective bargaining. So that was really a nice little bonus. But ironically, the system itself has helped us a great deal with building trust, because the performance standards are very clear. The level of clarity with only 7 standards and our ability to take those standards and have teachers say, because part of the training that we did was they had to identify the indicators that they thought represented those standards. Once they did that, we were able to turn around and give them that and say, look, here are the things that you've said would represent this standard in the classroom. So when we're in a classroom, we're really drawing from some of the things they said themselves about what makes for demonstration of a particular standard. The trust issue is going to continue. I think that's part of a larger political, cultural thing. But just so you know, they really, at least while we thought this was, boy, this is top priority, we've got to get moving, everybody's going to buy in, it wasn't for most of our staff. And the trust issue is something that we've been working on through good communication about what we're doing, why we're doing it. We involved our union president right from the beginning. Our union president, now I will tell you, we're very fortunate. Our union president is as tough on us as leaders as she is on her own membership. I mean, and if you're fortunate to have somebody like that, it really helps, because there's very little in the sense of sympathy. She expects the teachers to all work hard and do a great job. I mean, she certainly will come after us with this, that, or the other thing, but she bought into this model because this model to her represented a fair system of figuring out who are the really good teachers and who aren't. And she doesn't want the ones that aren't that great in our school district. So that's a little bit of a plus for us. I mean, not a little, that's a big one. That is very helpful. Another thing that's come up that we've seen, and I don't think it would matter on the particular model, but it definitely does matter in this model as well, and that's basic assessment literacy. Dr. Stronge talked about, when he was up here, he said, one of the issues that really seems to be in play here is the teachers just don't understand how to develop, how to interpret, in some cases even how to properly administer an assessment. And we discovered that. Now, to understand this is an evolution of something we've been doing over time. And one of the things that we did was we did a basic assessment literacy training for our teachers. We did 2 full days, every staff member, and we did that 2 years ago, and now it's part of our ongoing whenever a teacher joins us. Because all of these models are going to depend upon your teacher's ability to create, administer, interpret, and utilize data. And so we, in this model in particular, but in all the models, because you've got your non-tested subject areas, but your tested subject areas as well, that's going to be an issue. You know, the ability to interpret that data, use that data. We viewed this as, and part of the reason that we really like the model is it's one part of an overall evaluation. The evaluation itself is part of a personnel process. Dr. Strong talked about alignment. We had to, when we had used bits and pieces of his model from reading the books when we made our revision to our evaluation observation program several years ago. We weren't able to fully implement it until we got the grant. But when we had that, we realized, well, our job descriptions need to change because they have to match the evaluation. Our professional development needs to change to match and tie into the standards. This is part of a much larger process, and I don't think the people at the State Department realize that. What they've kept in the meetings we've been a part of, it's all about the evaluation, but the evaluation is almost the end piece of a much larger system. So we really need to make sure and think through, this is just one part of a much larger puzzle, or else you're going to have a system where you're just not aligned. And so we've been trying to create that thought within the heads of the decision makers, but we've had limited success. One of the things is the evaluation of your non-classroom teachers. I think this is a dilemma that everybody is facing right now, is what do you do with your guidance counselor? What do you do with your nurse? What do you do with, what do you do, here's another good one, what do you do in co-teaching when you have the special ed regular ed teacher? I will tell you that one, the answer from that we are hearing in part from the state is kind of ludicrous. I don't want to go there. But I will tell you my own personal opinion on that one is that we are moving in a very bad direction with that. I hope we won't continue down that pathway. But on the other hand, one of the things that we decided and reasons that we selected Dr. Strong's model was because all of the systems align. That's really the beauty. If you think about it, there are performance standards and a process that's aligned for all systems. Now, to my knowledge, the other systems didn't have that. So when we researched this and we were thinking down the road saying, well, what is this going to mean for us after we get done with classroom teachers and we have to include everybody in the fold? Well, as far as we knew, Danielson and Marzano, they really only were classroom teachers. Dr. Stronge was the only one we saw that had this other element that said, no, you can extend this and have a parallel model that's similar for all of your staff. So thinking ahead, that was important to us because we wanted an aligned system so there was consistency and there was not confusion. We have struggled, and I know Mrs. Dominic would definitely agree with this, and you will struggle with the number of observations you're going to be required to do. The change in this is, I mean, we're throwing this on top, obviously, of new bullying, harassment, intimidation requirements, right? So the same people who have to do more observations are now dealing with that, as well as all the other responsibilities they have. But one of the things we like about this model is the observation process is straightforward.
Is there data that says teacher A has improved year 1 to year 2 more so or equally or better than they would have improved in another system?
There is no easy answer to the question. I can give you sort of a backdoor response. There is considerable empirical evidence surrounding the components in the evaluation system and that indicate improved performance. And the best measure of improved performance is improved student achievement. Mm-hmm. That's our ultimate measure. If we use the SLO process, there's evidence that dates back 20, 30 years that would show, even just using prerequisite skill assessment, which is built into the SLO process or goal-setting process, achievement goes up 0.7 standard deviation. And there's more recent research that shows achievement, which is translates from, say, the 50th to about the 75th percentile. That's a whopping increase. And there's other research on that. A study that I published, that I co-authored, was lead author on, that was published in the Journal of Teacher Education, really sort of academically oriented article published last September. We took the value-added results that we have, high-performing teachers, low-performing teachers, trained observers, sent them into the classrooms to see what those teachers are doing, and then we compared the results across multiple dimensions. we found that there were places where our teachers who are getting high gain scores behave systematically differently. They have far fewer disruptions and disengaged behavior. In fact, in that study, we found a disruption or disengaged behavior in ineffective teachers' classes every 20 minutes. We found them, we still found them in the best teachers, but about once an hour. So 3 times more frequently in less effective teachers. That tells us then that that's not say it's causal. Your question is a causal question, and it's virtually impossible in our field to find cause-effect relationship. This, what I'm describing, is more what we would describe as ex post facto, which means after the fact. I can tell you that what we're looking for in the behaviors of the teachers correlate very highly with getting higher gain scores. We have a component on classroom management and the kind of elements that we're using. When teachers do those and implement those, student achievement goes up. The other side of it is that our best teachers, we see it in their classes. Another place where we saw a dramatic difference between the better, the good, the best, and the not so good teachers was in relationships with students.
Yeah.
Much more positive relationships that were measurable by 2 observers going into the classrooms and documenting those. So the kind of elements that we have in the evaluation do show that they have validity. So that's probably the best way that I can answer it.
Okay. And
Final point I would offer is that
statistically, the better teachers teach the higher achievers. So there is that correlation as well.
Well,
the best teachers in my school, I'm going to give. I mean, that's statistically.
The problem teachers need to worry about is having all the high ability kids when you're using gain scores, because there's a ceiling effect.
Sure.
And you can't measure the growth.
Exactly.
There is very solid evidence that the tide rises for all ships in the best teachers' classes, and the ships sink in the ineffective teachers' classes, if you will. There's a very strong, clear distinction and good, solid research on showing what effective and less effective teachers do. We've picked those elements that make good teachers good and predicated the evaluation system on those.
I guess I'm just asking, how do you translate a marginal teacher by having that difficult conversation? How do you get the result of higher student achievement? That's the thorny.
That is a tough one, because the research on professional development has not been that promising over the years. We have 3 options for those less effective teachers. Number 1, don't hire them.
Well, they're hired. Let's say.
Number 2, but that's the case. Number 1, don't hire them.
That's about 2% in any
Number
state,
2,
especially now in the state.
Number 2, help those teachers develop and have the kind of system that Matt and Joy are talking about, where you focus like a laser beam on what is quality instruction. You're not afraid to give feedback on that, and then you have development to support it. For example, in student assessment, build those assessment skills. And the third element is when you have teachers who can't get good, forgive my choice of language there, who won't get good, who are ineffective for a variety of reasons, don't keep them in the classroom. I don't care what the cost is. There's an enormous opportunity cost if you keep placing kids in classes where teachers are harmful.
Where would we put them, Doctor, with all due respect?
You don't leave them in the classroom. You cannot afford to put them in the classroom. It's costly to remove that person. You have a pre-tenure period in New Jersey of 3 years. When we end up with bad teachers in our building, it's our fault as administrators to a degree. So starting and going forward, we can fix that. Teachers who are already on board, you must do something about them. And your only defenses are to help them grow and improve. If they can't or won't grow and improve, you must do something about it if they're harming children. Let me introduce Elizabeth Combs, who is with My Learning Plan, OASIS.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to see what we have to offer this morning. And a special thank you to Dr. Stronge for organizing this for us. What I'd like to do is give you a brief overview of My Learning Plan, OASIS. As you know, OASIS is an evaluation management system. It's a data platform to support evaluation frameworks. And so what we're going to do today is just take a quick look at the system, I hope to give you an overview, and certainly if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or if you'd like to follow up with questions afterwards, we'd be happy to entertain them then as well. So what I'm going to do here is start by logging into the system as if I'm a teacher or an end user. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to refer to teachers as the evaluatee, so to speak. Although, in fact, the end user could be a principal, support staff member, superintendent, whoever is actually the person being evaluated. What you see when you log into the system initially is an individual's learning plan tab. And I'm going to start by scrolling down to the bottom, because the area in green here is actually the evaluation part of the system. And this is displaying for the teacher the information regarding their specific evaluation. It identifies the individual components of their evaluation process based upon status. So if we start up here at the top, we notice that for this individual teacher, who's named, has one formal observation that's been scheduled. And so the teacher themselves can log in, they can see when that's been scheduled, and in fact this has been set so that they can decline the schedule if they wanted to propose an alternative date other than what has been scheduled so far. The next status here is action required. And this is showing this particular teacher that there are two things that they need to do. There's a goal setting form that's here ready for them to complete. And so in order to do that, I would just click on the link, and here it's going to open the Stronge goal setting form. Now all of these forms that you see here are already configured in the system for Dr. Stronge's process, although they can be also customized. So if there's individual pieces or language that you would want to tweak, that can be done as well. I go back to the Learning Plan tab here, and I see that there's also an observation document review that's a conference that's been scheduled, and it's waiting for the teacher at this point to either accept the schedule or decline it. So in this case, the administrator has proposed a time and is looking for the teacher to accept that. And then down at the bottom, there's the pre-observation conference that's already been completed. And again, the teacher can see that completed form simply by highlighting the link and opening up that form. If I can move up to the top of this screen, my learning plan is also a professional development management system. And so the areas you see in blue here are focusing on the PD part of our system. But what I do want to point out is this learning loop section in the middle. One of the advantages of using both my learning plan and OASIS together is that it does allow you to automatically recommend professional development activities based upon evaluation results. So in this case here, we see that there are 3 areas that this teacher has been marked as in need of further development through the evaluation process. And the teacher, when they log in, can see what those areas are. And then by clicking on this view link, it actually opens up a list of individual activities available to this teacher that are aligned specifically with those needs. So the first need was connect concepts and engage learners. And here we see that this teacher has already registered for one activity that's aligned to that goal, and that there are 2 additional ones available for registration through the district catalog. So these would be activities that the district is offering to staff. And there's also an activity available here through a third-party catalog, which can be interfaced with my learning plan. So the idea is to gather all of the professional learning opportunities that are available into one location so that a teacher can see the targeted activities and register as appropriate. The other section here that refers to the evaluation process on the Learning Plan tab is the My Evaluation section here. And here's where a teacher can go and see all of the historical evaluations that have been completed with them, The idea is to provide transparency so that a teacher is seeing, in most cases, exactly the same things, the same forms that an administrator would be seeing. So the teacher can log in and see their historical information. They can also see any ad hoc or informal observations that have been completed for them, as well as collect artifacts or files online. So over the course of a year, a teacher might want to create their own portfolio of artifacts where they upload samples of student work, perhaps videos or audio files, lesson plans or unit plans they're creating. And they can just keep them on file, perhaps for discussion through the conferences that are held as part of the evaluation process. So this is the teacher or the end user side of the system. What I'd like to do now is log out and log back in as somebody with administrative rights. So you notice at the top here now we have more tabs, and I'm going to go over to the District Admin tab and specifically the Process View for OASIS. The Process View is the overview that provides an administrator the status of all the evaluations that they're required to complete. So if you're a building principal, this would be a list of all the staff that you are required to evaluate. If you're in central office, this might be all teachers in the district. And you'll notice that for each person, it gives us their name, it gives us their evaluation type or group. This is telling us what their specific evaluation requirements are. There may be a situation where teachers on an improvement plan have different requirements than teachers who are not on an improvement plan. Certainly principals would have different components as part of their evaluation process than a teacher. So it tells us what group they're a part of, their evaluation period, the start and end date, and then the progress. And this progress bar shows us how many components or evaluation requirements there are for this individual, and then how many of those have been completed. And so we can sort and filter this group any way we want. And I'm just going to go up here and pull a particular type up that we've set up to demonstrate Dr. Stronge's process and how that works within OASIS. So again, I'm going to select this individual named Teacher Stronge. And as soon as I do that up at the top of the screen, the bottom of the screen displays the individual components or requirements for that person. So here at the bottom, we see that Teacher Stronge has 5 components assigned as part of their evaluation process, including the goal setting, 2 formal observations, a student survey, and then the summative form. If I open up any one of these, it will show any forms that are related to that component. So in this case, we have a formal observation that actually has 3 forms associated with it. The pre-observation conference form, the formal observation form itself, and then the post-observation document review form. In addition, it shows us for each one of these forms the scheduling information, the status, and then there's a couple of icons. One of these icons would let me schedule this form. If I wanted to, in this case, reschedule it, I can do that here. Or if I want to actually complete this form, I can pull up the form. And if this is an observation form, perhaps I'm going into the classroom now to complete this observation, I can pull this form up on an iPad. It's completely iPad or iPhone or any Android mobile device compatible. And once I pull up the form, I can also pull up my scratch pad. The idea of the scratch pad is that it allows you to collect evidence during an observation without having to worry about where specific fields on an individual form might be. So as I'm watching the lesson, I can just type and script the lesson or collect evidence to the extent that I want to. And then at any point in time, I can save these comments. And simply by hovering over one of them, it's going to highlight it, and I can then drag that comment to a specific field. So the idea would be to collect all your evidence using the scratch pad during the lesson, and then you can go ahead and align that to individual standards or domains afterwards. So this is the example here of the observation form. As an administrator, I can save this as a draft, which just allows me to save it until perhaps I go back to my office and clean it up a little bit, and then I can submit it. Submitting it forwards it to the teacher for their review and acknowledgement. Another example of what a form might look like is the Summative performance form here. And if I open up this form, you'll see there's a couple of other features that are added. So in this case, one of the things that we have is because of the integration with my learning plan, the professional development system, the system will automatically place on any form a list of all of the professional development activities an individual has participated in. So here, when I'm going through to do the final report for an individual teacher, I see here all those activities they participated in over the previous year, or however long you set that. One of the items listed here is the communication log. So the communication log form is also being collected through my learning plan, and if I click on, if I click on the actual form, one of the things that I can see right here is a list of all the communications that have taken place by that teacher over the course of the year. So again, this is just collecting another one of the multiple measures, the communications piece. Continuing down this form, there are rubrics. And so here we see the individual rubrics associated with the standards. And these are interactive rubrics, meaning that all I need to do is click on a cell, and by highlighting that cell, it is then selecting that and scoring it. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but at the very bottom of the rubric here is a score. And these are simply scored in this example, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you notice as I click around, the score changes. And this is going to help us put together the total composite score that's required for the end of the year. So I can do my scoring and coding here, and then I would go ahead and finish and complete this form and submit it. So I come back again to my process view. I'm going to show you one more example of a form, and that's a form that has a composite score already created for it. One of the advantages of Oasis is that it does allow you to configure the composite scores required by the state based upon any components that you want to measure. So this is an example of a composite score tool that's been added on this form that actually has 3 parts to it. In this case, there's the 60% multiple measures part that's here. Then there's 40% adding up for the student achievement piece, although it's broken down into 2 parts, 20% student achievement and 20% student growth. This is all configurable. So whatever you call these, whatever the state requires, is just what's built in here. But the idea is that the system will automatically take all the scores from the rubrics that are scored for an individual teacher through the evaluation process, total them up, and compare them to the maximum possible score, and convert that into a score based upon whatever the percentage is. I think it might be 50% multiple measures in New Jersey. And in that case, then it adds it to the student growth or student achievement scores, comes up with a total score, compares that total score to whatever rating scale you enter into the system, again, completely configurable, and then identifies what the overall rating for this individual teacher is. So again, all this is configurable, and I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the scoring capability that's also built into the system. From looking at forms, forms, the other piece I'd like to kind of share quickly with you is some of the reporting capabilities. There are all kinds of canned reports and ability to drill down and create your own reports in here, as well as some specialized reporting tools that we've built. What you're looking at here is the detail view. And the detail view is really used for the management side of things, making sure everybody's completing everything they need to complete within the time frame, all the requirements are fulfilled and things along those lines. And so the idea with the detail view is it displays everything, but it quickly and easily allows you to filter and sort this information and save views any way that you might like. So for instance, I have a view here that shows my upcoming events for the next 30 days. If in fact I was an administrator, this view would show me what are those things that are scheduled for me to complete for the next month. I can look and see which are the incomplete self-reflections, who hasn't completed a self-reflection yet. Or maybe I want to see what's not scheduled yet, what's out there that still needs to be scheduled. If it's not scheduled, it's not going to be completed. So again, the detail view is the management screen that just helps you make sure that everything that needs to be attended to is in fact being attended to. And then the last reporting pieces I would want to show you is some of the tools that we've built, specifically to help drill down and understand some of the data that's being collected. The one that I'm looking at here is called a Rubric Explorer. And I'm going to go through and pick one specific rubric. And the system just went out and it found all of the forms that that particular rubric is added to. And I just changed the date range to run this for 2 years, and I'm going to go view it. So the system just went out and it pulled up every time this specific rubric has been completed for somebody. And it comes back and it displays it as a heat map. Generally, the darker the color, the more often that cell has been selected. So you see here that for the criteria procedures, that 40% of the time that this rubric was completed, teachers were scored as effective in that criteria. And you may have noticed that as I hover over individual cells, it will display the names of the individuals that were scored for that cell. So it gives you a nice quick overview of exactly what's going on. And in fact here I see just by looking at this and scrolling down that I have 20% of my teachers scoring as ineffective for discussion techniques. And so this helps you identify that there's something going on there. Either my evaluators aren't sure how to identify that, maybe my staff needs additional professional learning in that area. But the goal of the Rubric Explorer is to just help drill down and identify exactly what's happening. The last tool I would show you, just again to give you an idea of some of the reporting capabilities, is called the Growth Explorer. It's similar to the Rubric Explorer in that it allows you to drill down through the data. The difference is that in this case, we're not drilling down against a rubric. We're drilling down against any multiple choice questions that you might have on any form. So what I just did here was I pulled up a specific group of teachers, tenured teachers in this case, and from that group, I selected only one person. Oh, so we could run this for an entire building or district, but in this case, I'm just going to run it to Sarah. And then I found the question that's on a number of her forms that says areas for further development. And when the form is completed, there's a number of options. And I'm going to view the results by year. You'll notice I'm running this over about a 4-year period. And this is the result. For that area of further development, that question, areas for further development, here are all the possible choices. And again, what this is showing me is how often they've been selected. So you see that over time, the number of areas that have been identified for further development have been decreasing. Whereas there were quite a few in 2007, by 2010, there's only one. So again, it's just a way to provide some of the data in graphic format. That was a very quick overview, but I hope that you get a sense of some of the functionality that's built into the system. If there are any specific questions now, I'm more than happy to answer them, or if you'd like to follow up and contact us with any additional questions or to schedule a demonstration, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Okay, we do have some questions for you, Elizabeth.
Sure.
Elizabeth, what are the expectations of who is the personnel that lists all the staff? I saw when you have a list of all the staff, tenured, non-tenured, who inputs that?
Basically, when we first configure the system, we would ask you to give us a list of the evaluation groups that you have identified for your school district. So you certainly would have a group called principals, maybe central office staff. If you use the system to support staff, you would identify them. And then you have teachers. And depending on your organization, you may have one group called teachers, or you may break teachers down into several groups. First-year teachers, non-tenured teachers, whatever the case may be. When we first configure the system, you would give us a spreadsheet that identifies who your teachers are and what group they fall under. We import that into the system when we create the account. Moving forward, there's a tool that allows you to automatically move people through groups. So if you have a year 1 teacher group, a year 2 teacher group, and a year 3 teacher group, then at the end of year 1, the system can automatically roll over everybody to group 2.
Elizabeth,
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. I also had a similar question regarding your professional learning activities. In that, under there, you had all these recommendations of professional learning workshops, seminars for the teacher. Who inputs that information in there?
That would come from one of 2 places. The My Learning Plan system includes a professional development catalog where a district can manage all of their professional learning for their staff. It keeps track of certification requirements, if you're paying salary increases based on PD, manages all forms aligned with out-of-district professional development, authorization, and approval. And there's a catalog in there where a district can enter and maintain the activities that they're making available to their staff. That is the catalog that the Learning Loop is pulling from to show recommended PD. So any professional development you offer your staff would be entered into the catalog. When you're entering it, you're doing various alignments, and those alignments are what's being used to identify what's recommended for whom. The second possibility is we do have a product that many professional development providers use and for professionals to manage their catalogs. And for those organizations, their catalogs can also be integrated into My Learning Plan. And so in the example I showed, you might have noticed it's a district catalog, and there were some activities, and it said Great River catalog. In that example, the Great River would be an outside provider that's using our registration tool, and therefore their activities are made available as well.
Let's get the pricing, the last piece of material we have for you. There are 3 pricing components with my evaluation system. Number 1 is the program development, and I'll tell you what's included in that after we get through the pricing. That will be for the teacher and ed specialist systems, a one-time fee of $75 per user. A user is defined as a teacher, counselor, administrator, anybody who's coming on the system. If you have, there's a minimum of $5,000 for a district. There is, for those with more than 500 users, we will negotiate the price, and it will end up being less than $75 per user. If you want to add the leader evaluation component, there's an additional $3,000 one-time fee for that. You get so you have the total evaluation package. Training that will be provided here at PSA will be $150 per person per day. We're going to have required training a minimum of 3 days. Actually, it will be exactly 3 days, and we'll have all optional training beyond that. And the other option is that we can provide the training in district. That's $3,000 a day. When you get more than 30 people, I think it is, or actually it's less than that, we just have to divide 150, 20 people. 21 people, it's more efficient for you to have it in your own site. Also, we require training for evaluators. Teacher training has 3 options. We will provide that here at PSA for you to bring teacher leaders and others. We will provide that on site for you, or we will give you the materials and the wherewithal to provide your own teacher training. Alexandria did their own teacher training. We trained their trainers, their leaders, their evaluators, and then they trained, and then I followed up with a visit last month on site. So there's some choices to make it a little more efficient for you. The last element is the electronic platform. There is a one-time fee of $3,000 per district, not per school, per district, and then an annual subscription fee of $12 a user if you already subscribe to my learning plan, $15 if you only want Oasis. Now, if I were in your place, I'd want to be comparing these prices to what the other vendors are offering, and I hope you will also compare what we're providing. So it's not, the price is important, but the systems are going to be different. So make certain that you look at what we're providing. You'll find that we're competitive, but we want to sell based on the quality of what we have. Now, turn over to the front page. I'll do a very quick walkthrough of what's included on these pricing components, and then let's spend a moment or two with comments and questions. Under the first one, the one-time fee of the $75 per user, it provides you with the intellectual property, the copyright, the privilege to use the copyrighted material for the teacher, leader, and specialist evaluation systems in your school district in perpetuity. So you never pay Stronge and Associates again for using that. We will also provide you camera-ready, completed evaluation handbooks. They're probably 50, 60 pages or so, maybe a little more. But completed and customizable for you. But they will be camera-ready, delivered to you in a Word file for you to put in place. So we're intending this to be a turnkey approach. So you don't have to go back and have a team to develop your evaluation system. It's done. You tweak it if you choose, but we're trying to take out as much labor for this for you as we can. We will provide orientation training materials like PowerPoints and handouts and give those to you. We'll also provide support material if you want to train teachers as opposed to us having training teachers. We will have fact sheets on every single standard for teachers and leaders and so forth, resource materials, activities to work with videos, and then there will be selected research reports, which is sort of under the surface material that you may need to work with. We're giving you everything that we think you need. That's the price, the $75 per user, or the minimum of the $5,000, the one-time fee. Some of the other companies I expect are going to provide on a subscription basis over a period of years. We're going to do it on an upfront basis with this. On training, the basic pricing that we're using is $150 per user for training here, $3,000 per day training at your site. And we'd want to keep, you can decide with the trainers how many people you have attending, but we'd want to make that cost effective. At the same time, you don't want 500 people in a room having this training. So there are options. And then I mentioned earlier, I think a critical element is that we're going to be here. We intend to be here for the duration. We will be here with follow-up training and support for instructional leadership, conferencing skills, goal setting or SLO development for you and your teachers over the period of time as we proceed with that. We're going to begin training, or we anticipate beginning training, as early as May for administrators. There's going to be a sign-up period that we will have in the near future. We'll contact you again, invite you to participate. If you choose to go with my evaluation design and with NJPSA, there will be a contract that my company will have with your school district, which will give you the legal rights to use the material. It will have a costing, and there will be a pay structure, and that I'm not an employee of the district, all the kind of things that you have to have. And there will also be a contract for you from my learning plan. can also tell you from my learning plan, you're going to find that our total package is very, very competitive. They have about a 97 or 98% renewal rate on an annual basis. And you have their pricing again for you. Dr. Doolin, let me turn this back to you. Thank you for being here today, ladies and gentlemen.